The reason I quit teaching was because of student behaviors. The behaviors of students, whatever the reasons behind them may be, I felt were unsustainable for me, quite literally a hostile environment. And yeah, I went to school day to day, disassociating and experiencing panic attacks because I could not handle the constant chaos and disrespect and literally putting out fires every 5 seconds. And so the student behaviors are what caused me to have a mental breakdown and need to leave the classroom.
Hi friends, this is Trish and welcome to Teacher Therapy. In today's video, I want to talk about the direct connection between horrible student behavior and teachers' declining mental health. And I feel really passionate about this topic because I went through the same thing. And I feel like so many teachers are afraid to talk about this because of the public's reaction. Many people that have never taught a day in their lives like to make fun of teachers and say that we have a thin skin or that we're too soft. Or worse, they like to blame teachers and say it's all their fault. And this doesn't just happen with the general public, it also happens sometimes with administrators and parents. So many teachers are secretly struggling under the weight of not only shame, but also stress from being treated so poorly by students. So let's talk about it. One of the most surprising things to me when I entered the classroom in 2013 is the fact that disrespect is the norm. And I was shocked because I truly don't remember kids being so disrespectful when I was in school. And for context, I went to school throughout the 90s and graduated from high school in 2005. And here's the thing, it just wasn't normal for the vast majority of students to roll their eyes, smack their lips, do head rolls, and just generally have this angry, defiant, rude attitude toward teachers. But it went way beyond that by the time I got in the classroom. The things kids felt comfortable saying to my face was so shocking. During my first year of teaching, apparently I was stress eating and put on a few pounds because I had students directly asking me if I was pregnant. And when I said no, they said, well, you need to lose weight. Unbelievable. I would also have students routinely make comments about my clothes and my shoes or my hair. They treated me as if I was their peer. And there was no sense of authority or the fact that I was an adult. It was very strange. And granted, I was a little bit young. I was 25, but still, when I started, these were fourth graders that were acting like this. And the more strange thing to me was when I would go to their parents and casually mention it, they would say, oh, I'm sure that he or she didn't understand what they were saying or implying. And I'm thinking, you need to lose weight sounds pretty clear to me. I mean, really? But I was just really surprised at how much parents would defend their kids' behavior. This went all the way up through when I was teaching 8th grade. Kids would make really uncomfortable gestures or innuendos or say downright inappropriate things, and I would mention it to their parents. Oddly enough, parents would start defending themselves and say, oh, well, we only watch PG things at home and we monitor their screen time. So they couldn't have been saying what you think they're saying. Again, they must have just been confused. So there was like this willful ignorance about how kids really were. And of course, children are going to take advantage of this because they learn to be liars and manipulators, to speak plainly. They know that their parents will believe anything they say. And this is like giving a kid a blank check, or in these days, a blank credit card to do whatever they want to do. In more serious cases, I have felt downright bullied by students. Not only have I been called the B word to my face, but again, my nightmare year of teaching 7th and 8th grade at a private school, the kids tried to torment me all year long. They made memes about me and spread them all over Instagram. Kids made up career-ending rumors for fun just to spread it to their parents and outrage them because the parents would believe their kids about me, but their parents would not believe me about their kids. So again, kids had a blank check to just literally torment me for sport. And the rumors and allegations got wilder and wilder as the school year went on. Those particular kids would also make racial jokes about me, which was super uncomfortable. And they would also do it to each other. This school maybe had about 4 Black students out of the 150 or so that I had, and they would make up stereotypically Black names for students. So if the boy's name was Timothy, they would turn his name into Darrell. Or if the girl's name was Brittany, they would call her LaQuanda. That kind of stuff went on all year long. And no adults that were in charge, like administration or parents, were really doing anything about it. So it was definitely a hostile working environment. And the part that scares me is kids' capacity to bully teachers online is only getting worse because of things like AI. So if this problem isn't seriously dealt with, I only think it's going to get so much worse for teachers. But even when I wasn't dealing with serious disrespect and misbehavior, the entitlement of the students was off the charts. Again, I taught 4th grade through 8th grade, so I get that they're kind of testing out their ability to be willful. However, it was just downright rude. Students felt free to criticize my teaching methods or content directly to my face or insinuate that I was not doing a good job. And again, I never would have thought to do that to my teachers as a young person. It just wasn't even in the realm of possibility to me. But I was constantly getting comparisons, like, this teacher does this better than you, you should do it how they do it. And their parents would back them up on that kind of behavior. If I mentioned it casually to parents, they would be like, well, maybe you should do what Miss So-and-so does. So again, the kids would see their awful, obnoxious behavior reinforced with their parents. And this even happened with admin. I remember at said private school being called into a meeting where the administrator asked this student, who was a 7th grader, to tell me how I could improve as a teacher. So can you imagine a student really respecting their teacher after experiencing something like that? Absolutely not. On the more subtle end of things, there were also a surprising amount of mind games that especially middle schoolers would play. And the weird thing is that we've already established parents didn't believe it, but a lot of times administrators wouldn't really believe it either. It's as if everyone in the world forgot how mischievous and sometimes mean young people can be. So I would constantly have groups of girls that would spend their time talking in the hallway, because this was middle school. They had a passing period of maybe 6 or 7 minutes, and they wouldn't do anything they were supposed to do during the passing period, such as using the restroom. They would all literally wait until the bell rung and they were in my class to all simultaneously ask to go to the bathroom. Because again, kids know they could just cry to their parents and say, the teacher won't let me use the bathroom, and conveniently leave out the part about how they were all corralled in the hallway talking in front of the class instead of going to the bathroom during the passing period. So that kind of stuff happened all the time, and it was super exhausting. I would also have a few students that made it their game in life to try to fall asleep during my lessons. And the crazy thing is that I would get in trouble for that if an administrator walked in and somebody was sleeping, because they would say, you failed to engage this student. So I would incorporate in my classroom expectations that students are sitting up at all times, they're tracking the speaker. In some schools that would be called slant or scholars position. And it was just a part of the expectations. But kids would pick things like that to go to war with all year long. They'd have their heads down, they'd be slumped over, they would intentionally fall asleep or pretend to fall asleep. And it was just a lot of weird mind games, and that stuff got really exhausting. The truth is, teaching the age group that I taught, I often felt like I was back in middle school. Since consequences went completely out the window, kids don't respect authority or their teachers, and a lot of times neither do their parents. All a teacher has is to try to be popular and get the kids to like them. And I'm sorry to say this, but the role of a teacher isn't always compatible with that, because we're asking them to do hard work. We're holding them to high behavioral expectations. We're expecting them to challenge themselves and show some perseverance and grit. And guess what? Kids don't always like that. So I would feel an enormous amount of pressure to somehow have all these high standards and get kids to work really hard. Yet somehow, magically and mysteriously, I was supposed to be so entertaining that every kid just loved me. And you know what? I think I'm a kind person, but I found that difficult. Because when kids are not used to hearing no, and they're not used to being held to high expectations, any form of holding the line feels mean to them. So I would have kids say, oh, you're so mean. And again, with the comparisons, I've had years where a co-teacher just gave them donuts and candy all the time and maybe put on movies and let them get away away with a lot. So naturally the kids would say, oh, Miss So-and-so is the fun teacher and you're the mean teacher. So there was a lot of that went on. It was also stunning to me how one or two kids could change the temperature and the group dynamics of a whole room, especially if they were the so-called popular kid, because just like in middle school, that one kid could turn a whole class against the teacher. And again, I think so much of this wouldn't happen if there were rules and standards that teachers were allowed to enforce with negative consequences. But the reigning methodology and philosophy in modern education is restorative practices, restorative justice, and it's the idea, or at least it gets minimized to the idea, that you just need to talk and share your feelings. And if the kids just understand, then they'll do better. And if you're laughing, you'd be right to laugh, because the same kind of kids that are bullies and that will literally make up lies about a teacher, make hateful memes about a teacher, and try to get a teacher fired, those are not the kind of kids where that very teacher that's being bullied could sit down and talk and say, you know, little Billy, little Rashonda, it's really hurting my feelings what you're doing to me. And it's not like I didn't try that because I was told that that's what I should do, but that just makes the problem worse, because then the kids perceive the teacher as weak. So just like so many things in education, it is such a no-win situation for the teacher. Society says, toughen up, hold the line, show those kids who's boss. But then those kids will cry, say the teacher's mean, the teacher will get called into a meeting with admin and the parent, the kid will pretend to cry and be traumatized, and the teacher's in trouble. So you try the flip side, and you try to be really nice and kind and talk and share feelings. And then kids take that as a free-for-all because they feel like no adult is in charge in the room at that point. So what's a teacher supposed to do? You're either too nice or too mean, and the expectation is you come up with this miracle unicorn teacher formula to make kids magically love you and behave, and it doesn't work. Then there was years where the kids were just silly. They weren't necessarily malicious. They weren't trying to get me to curl up in a ball and cry in the middle of class, but they were just kind of naughty, you know? Singing, dancing, making jokes all the time, silly voices. And I understand that kids will be kids, but that gets exhausting because that is still a form of misbehavior. And it's a way that kids demonstrate to the teacher that they don't really take them seriously, they don't take the class seriously, they don't take the content seriously. So then that kind of atmosphere can easily turn into class clowns trying to outcompete each other, and that behavior is exhausting for a teacher. I was also surprised about kids' general inability to sit still, listen, and follow directions. I just remember having so much more tenacity as a kid and being able to sit still and be quiet. But as the years went on, that skill seems to be completely lost. And then there was constant pressure from admin or professional development meetings to be super collaborative and super engaging. So I felt like I had to stop what I was saying every 5 seconds to do a think, pair, share activity and give kids the opportunity to talk. And I understand that there could be a place for that, but it felt like only shallow learning could happen with a constant need for entertainment, for breaks, for turn-in talks, for videos. It just felt hard to really cover ground. And kids wouldn't do homework, so it wasn't even like I could reinforce the learning through assigned readings because the kids just wouldn't do it. Which led me to probably my biggest frustration. Teachers have an enormous amount of pressure put on them to raise test scores. However, kids don't feel that pressure because they pass no matter what. And in most of the regular school districts I worked at, they switched over to standards-based grading, so there was no traditional A through F system. So none of the classwork, group work, assignments, projects, none of that actually went into the grade book. There was just benchmark testing that maybe happened 4 times per quarter. And that's where all the pressure was put. So kids didn't take anything we did in class seriously. I could give no consequences or penalties for missing homework. And the year I quit was 2021, where we were still hybrid because of the global situation that was occurring at the time. And I had 90% of my students turning in absolutely nothing. And I was feeling like I had never worked harder in my life as a teacher. People acted like teaching online and in person was just super easy and teachers were kicked back with their feet on the table, eating bonbons, but I can assure you that was not the case. There was so much pressure put on us teachers with absolutely zero grace, who were still getting talked to about low test scores in spite of the kids doing absolutely nothing. And that really became my breaking point, because I realized I was truly in an impossible job. And I was in trouble no matter what. If students were misbehaving, I was in trouble for having bad classroom management. If students were doing poorly on tests, I was in trouble for not delivering effective enough instruction. If kids were disrespecting me, I was in trouble for not building a strong enough relationship with the students. If parents were mad, I was in trouble for not inspiring confidence with the parents. That happened to me at the private school. And this is really a combination of all my years of teaching that I'm telling you about, but it really started to pile up year after year after year. And I kept thinking, I just need to find a new school. So I taught at 5 different schools in 8 years. And then I would think maybe it's the grade level. So I also taught every grade between 4th and 8th grade in those 8 years. But there were similar problems no matter what building I went to. And that includes public, private, and charter school. So my genuine belief is that teaching philosophy has gone off the rails, and I wonder if it even matters at this point what kind of school it is. The only exception was that the private school was much more serious about academics than the public schools or the charter schools. And what I mean by that is kids could actually get detentions for not turning in homework. Whereas the public schools put the same amount of pressure on teachers for the kids to have high test scores. They just didn't put, again, any of the pressure on the kids. So there was a million excuses made for them why they couldn't do homework, why they couldn't do their projects, why they couldn't do their reading logs. Yet again, the teacher was still in trouble. And I can't say it enough. If there are no consequences for kids, this outcome is what you can expect. For the most part, especially young people, they need consequences, both positive or negative, that can include rewards, to actually motivate them to do the right thing. And when that's taken off the table and kids, for a various amount of reasons, don't have any intrinsic motivation, this is what you can expect. Kids that don't take school seriously, kids that will misbehave for fun, kids that will try to target teachers that really care and try to uphold high standards. It's just chaos. And all of this contributes to teachers suffering in silence, because no teacher wants to have the reputation as the teacher that can't control their classroom. So a lot of teachers just smile and say everything's okay when it absolutely is not. Over the years, I found out a secret about a lot of teachers, and it's a sad one. Many of them are resorting to all kinds of coping mechanisms just to make it through the day. A lot of teachers have problems with alcohol. A lot of teachers are on prescription medication for mental health. I've known of teachers that needed to take Xanax just to get through the day. And a lot of teachers are struggling with healthy living. I mentioned how I turned to the Krispy Kreme when I was stressed out. And so I would just look around and a lot of teachers would be very unhealthy because sugar and carbs were their coping mechanism. And I think there is a silent mental health crisis amongst teachers. And I can relate to this. By April of 2021, I was beyond stressed out. I came into the profession with some mild anxiety and depression, but after 8 years of teaching, I felt emotionally and mentally fried. I was so stressed out all the time. I felt completely burnt out. And even though the final school I taught at was not even the worst school or the worst situation that I've been in, I just didn't have anything left anymore. I felt desperate. I used my EAP counseling so much because it was free, but that wasn't enough. I even spent a short season taking prescription medicine for anxiety and depression, but that also was not enough. And I just realized that I couldn't deal with the pressures of real life and the pressures of teaching at the same time. It was too much. Work stressed me out so bad that I was wiped out by the end of the day, and I would just need to come home and sleep for 2 or 3 hours. And at that time, there was a family crisis going on, not to mention a global crisis going on. And I got to the point where I could not even finish the school year. I started getting getting weepy at school, which crying publicly is like on my top 5 list of things that I try never to do, but I was having trouble not crying at school. Other people could look at me and see that something was wrong, and that is also not in line with my personality because I try to be friendly and bubbly and chipper wherever I go. But I was having trouble even faking a smile. And eventually, after talking to my doctor, I just thought I need to take a family medical leave of absence. And I never stepped foot in a classroom again after that experience. The sad part is I would be overjoyed if I got sick or hurt, because that would be a ticket to be able to call in and not go to work. And if you really think about it, that's sad. When pain makes you happy because you don't have to go to work, that's pretty serious. But I think it's so normalized amongst teachers to be miserable that it becomes a part of culture in the school. And the sad part is it doesn't have to be this way. I firmly believe with every part of my being, if we brought back consequences and brought back the opportunity for kids to fail if they just didn't do their work and didn't try, that would change things overnight. But people that claim that they understand kids and research keep saying that punitive consequences don't work, therefore we need to sit in a kumbaya circle and talk out our feelings. And it's not working. Teachers are leaving like crazy. Now, I could continue to tell you stories for days, but I would encourage you to check out some of my teacher interviews if you want to hear more stories. But teaching is kind of a terrible job right now in 2025. And I just want teachers to know that they are not alone and they are not crazy and things are different and they are worse than they were probably when most of us went to school. And I want the general public to know that teachers aren't quitting because they don't like kids or can't handle kids. They're quitting because they're being blamed, gaslit, and disrespected every day. And people can only stand up under that for so long. It takes a toll on the human psyche to just be disrespected every day. Many of us got into teaching because we loved teaching, and believe it or not, we loved kids. But because students are allowed to behave so terribly and do no work, there feels like there's not any joy or purpose left in being a teacher. So I said a lot. Teachers, share your stories in the comments. What's the craziest thing that's ever happened to you? And if you have positive stories, I love to hear those too. Let me know if there's any topics you want me to cover in the future. Thank you so much for watching and have a great day. Bye for now.